Hi, this is the Natalie avatar. I'll be talking remotely, but I can't actually join remotely because the boathouse doesn't have good enough internet, so I'm here today through Rachel's computer. Welcome to our Coxing class. So let's talk about Coxing responsibilities. And these are in order, and that's for a reason. There's a hierarchy of what you need to do. As you might know, you're not going to start with the high-level coxswain your first day out when you're sitting in the cox seat. Your first priority is to monitor safety, and if there's any safety concerns, notify a more experienced crew member or get us back to the dock. That's kind of your first priority. Monitoring for conditions like heat, exhaustion, cold, if there's too many motorboats out, if there's a boat equipment problem, anything like that. And if you don't know how to get us back in a safe manner, ask someone more experienced who's in the boat. And if all else fails, pull over, preferably on the boathouse side of the river, so that we can get to the boat and make adjustments. After safety comes judgment calls. That we kind of already talked about that. Protecting the equipment. Your next job is protecting the equipment if at all possible. Remember that when you are coxing, you are financially responsible for the boat. So that includes on land and in the water. If you lose a skeg the day you're coxing, it's on you to pay for it. If you crack a boat because you hit something, it's on you to pay for it. Just know that so you don't have to avoid those unnecessary fees. Steering is your next priority. It's kind of aligned with all of these things, but the stroke seat will help you if needed and should know how to do it. We're going to talk about it today, but where exactly you need to be takes some practice. We've got some, the rowers can help you not hit things, but you need to communicate with them to make sure that that's happening. Pressure on one side, pressure on the other side, or just weigh enough if you can't get to where you need to be. Your next priority is coordination of who is rowing when, like into, we're going to add into seat, etc., something like that. And then final priority is coaching. So it will take a long time if you're a new coxswain to get to the point where you can start making corrections. We want to make sure you're not hitting anything before you start looking at people's blades and trying to make corrections. I want to emphasize, though, that once you feel comfortable in the other things, you don't have to be the best rower in the boat to notice things about other people. So just notice what you notice, and you don't have to necessarily know how to fix it. Just point out, hey, you're skying your blade or you're rushing. It's pretty easy to see when something's wrong, even if you don't know how to fix it. Point it out. Someone else more experienced will chime in. Next, we're going to talk about coxing standards. So these are the things that are best practice. So always give advance notice, if at all possible, with the exception of an emergency way enough. Whenever you can, just give people notice. And then the probably most important thing is be clear and concise so people know what you're communicating. Even if you use the wrong words, we want you to practice the right words, but say things that people understand what you're talking about. Use a standard call if you know them. And if not, be clear in your communication about what needs to happen. You may be trying to say in 2, add in 2 and 3 seat. If you don't know how to say that, just say, Becca and Jason, you need to be rowing in 2 strokes. It's not ideal, but it gets the point across. When counting, like in 2, do something, always count at the catch. So at the catch, you'll go 1 and then 2. That's where your numbers are. And then the final thing, as many of us learned in the 8 recently at the race, never, ever, ever say you're almost there in a race. This will make everyone very upset at you. I don't care if it's 10 feet between you and the buoys. Just don't say it. Something else. So some things to be aware of when you're carrying the boats. The strongest position for a person to carry the boat is on their shoulders because it allows their bone structure to help carry the boat as well as their muscles. With our team, it's a little unfortunate because we have varying heights. So if you clump people, particularly in the 8, as close together as in size as you can, tallest people at one end, shortest people at the other end, and people closer in height to each other on each side of the boat, it'll get as close as we can get to doing that. Low heads is the hardest place to carry a boat because it's all on your arm muscles, and that's not necessarily the weakest muscle in anyone's body. So try and avoid low heads for a long extended period. Get out of low heads as soon as you possibly can. That avoids injury and then damage to the boat if we were to drop it because people get tired. That means that everyone should go home and do boat push-ups, which I know you don't have a boat at home, so take something heavy in your hands, probably about 25 pounds in each hand eventually is what you want to work up to being able to do overhead presses with. Right now, do what you can, slowly build over time, but by spring season, that needs to be easy. When athletes are stationary, waiting for a race or something, go ahead and bring the boat down to waist, because then you can pop a leg up and rest the boat on your leg. So I'm sure you guys have heard this many times of how to call for moving boats. I think we're giving you handouts of what these calls are, and then you'll get to practice later in the day. I'm going to go through them slowly just so you can hear them in your head. So we're going to move a boat off the rack, put it in the water, and take it back to the rack, skipping all the parts in between. Hands on, up an inch, and out. Reach across, crawl under one at a time. To shoulders, and up. Walk it forward, wide enough. Reach across, up over heads, and up. To water, and down. All right, getting it out of the water, up over heads, ready up, show shoulders, split to shoulders, walk it forward, to waist and down, reach across, crawl under one at a time, onto rack slowly, and down. One thing I forgot on the last slide, the and up and down, those are very important to add the and or ready up, ready down. That gives people the timing in their mind to prepare and then do it. You do it on the up or the down or the in. All right, getting to this slide. Getting into the boat, ports good oars, starboards good oar locks. We're going to make that the new standard. Getting in, oars across, 1 foot in and down. Count down from bow, and then they count down. And now we're back to the dock, 1 foot up and out, and then now the new standards is starboards good oars, ports good oar locks coming in. Just remember those standards. Those are our new standards. No one has to say anything, but those are what we do now. So we're going to talk about some in-the-boat commands right now. So this example is turning the boat to starboard. So we'll talk about steering in a minute, but you're going to turn your rudder with your right hand forward. And you're going to start with saying what we're going to do. We're going to turn. Starboards to back, ports to row. Ready, back, and row. Ready, back, and row, and back, and row. Way enough. Make sure you're giving enough time for that to actually happen for each of those things. And then continue until you're ready at the point. All right, now we're going to talk about the pick drill. So you're going to start out by saying, we're going to be doing the pick drill by pairs, stern pair, then bow pair. Stern pair ready at the finish. Arms only on the square. And row. Add the body in 2. That's 1, 2. Go to half slide in 2. That's 1, 2. Full slide in 2. That's 1, 2. Add in the feather in 2. That's 1, 2. In 2. Bow pair in, stern pair out, and then continue the process. So as your role of coxswain, you're also responsible for counting strokes if you feel competent doing so. If you do not feel competent doing so, communicate that with your stroke seat or someone else in the boat who will count, and they will let you know when to change and communicate that somehow. But I want you to work towards being able to count strokes. The final example I'm going to give is a pause drill example, because this is something else that we do commonly. So here's what you'll do for a pause drill. We're going to do a pause drill rotating through the pairs. Stern pair, rotating through the pairs. So that means stern pair, middle pair, bow pair, bookends. Stern pair, ready at the finish, pausing every stroke, ready, row, row, after waiting for every stroke on a pause. Make sure they have enough time to think about it wherever they're at. In 2, middle pair in, stroke seat out, that's 1, 2, in 2, bow pair in, 3 seat out, that's 1, 2, in 2, bookends in, 2 seat out, that's 1, 2, and way enough. So that's talking about rotating through pairs, pretty much, and pause drills. There are a lot of other drills we do in practice. There are a lot of coxing calls that you just kind of have to pick up over time. If you don't know how to cox something, ask someone. Yeah. So we've touched on this with a few of you, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same standard. River directions are as follows. If you are sitting facing downstream, river left is to your left, and river right is to your right. We do this because it's standard in any river sport, as well as coxswains and rowers are facing different directions. So right and left are very unhelpful. So river left and river right is how you describe where you need to be in the river. You can also say towards port and starboard if it's easier for you, but most of the descriptions in this presentation are river right and river left, so we get used to it. So I wanted to go through what our sections of river are so that everybody knows what they look like. I think Neil made a good map. I need to figure out how to get that on the website. So going from upstream, the S-turn, the island, the house, the rest eddy, bridge, lagoon, treadmill, launch eddy for high water, and summer launch eddy, downstream rest eddy, dead tree, beach, dock, irrigation pipe, mint farm, and the turnaround point. So as you go through your rowing journeys with us, those are the spots you need to know on the river. As we continue to improve as a crew, there might be more things we discover upstream. Downstream, we can't go any farther than the turnaround because there's some hazards. Upstream, there might be some more things we can discover. If you don't know what any of these things are, then we ask someone and we can show you where they're at the next time we pass them. So I wanted to talk about eddies real quick so that people can understand what they are. We talked about them a little bit. This is an example of a whitewater eddy right here, and so it really more clearly defines what they look like. Ours is not this defined, but it's doing the same thing. So in this picture, we actually have 2 eddies. There's one on each side. To a certain extent, we have that in our river as well, but the river right eddies are much smaller for the most part than our river left eddies in the section that we row on. The strongest eddy we have is the launch eddy, the winter launch eddy, and so it's a differential in current, and that's why the bow turns as soon as you hit the eddy line. The river hits an obstruction. The water wants to take the path of least resistance, which is the green arrows, and then recirculates back in behind the red arrows. It's caused by a turn in the river with something coming out as a peninsula or a rock or something like that. You just have to know how they work and know how to expect them. They are strongest at the most upstream point, so you're most likely to turn at the most upstream point. At the downstream side of an eddy, the eddy line is much weaker. So if the water is low enough, always enter and exit through the downstream. I mean, if the water is high enough, enter and exit through the downstream end of the eddy, just because it's a lot safer. There's unfortunately a lot of times in the summertime where we have to enter and exit through the only point that we can find that is deep enough to enter and exit through. So that means you just have to be prepared for it to hit your bow and be rowing on the downstream side of it so that it will keep the bow as far upstream as possible. Sometimes you have to hold water on the upstream side, or sometimes you have to do a full river turn to get it to get the bow upstream or downstream, whichever way you're trying to go. Eddies are great because they're a great place to stop. So if you have something happen and you don't want to be sent downriver too far, especially in the wintertime when the current's really high, pulling into an eddy, there's really 3 of them that are of any use. There's the launch eddy, there's one just downstream of where we put in the summer, and then there's one just upstream of the bridge. All 3 are pretty useful to take a break or fix equipment or whatever you need to do. At some river levels, there is a really strong eddy right in front of the lagoon. Just look at it. If it looks like a whirlpool, just don't enter it because it can be a boat flipper if you're not careful. But it's usually pretty obvious. It looks like water you don't want to be in if you're approaching it when it's bad conditions. So if it looks like you don't want to row through it, don't row through it. Entering at 45 degrees is kind of ideal for eddies, so that you don't get spun as much. They're already partially turned. That's kind of a more advanced thing. So continuing on with the 45-degree thing, 45 degrees is the magic number in boat movement in rivers. It's called a ferry angle, and it allows you to move across the river without losing as much ground. If you were to turn perpendicular to the river, it's actually less efficient than if you were to go at 45 degrees because you're using the water to push you across at 45 degrees, particularly if you have your bow upstream and you're rowing. It'll push you across while you're pulling back upstream, and you won't lose as much energy. It also works downstream, but know that you go downstream fast when you're rowing downstream. So for our instances, it may not be the best use of a ferry angle. That's for smaller boats and heavier boats. Other river hazards. Other river hazards include logs, gravel bars, speedboats, other manual boats. We often get flotillas of inflatable things. I'm sure many of you have seen them. Fishing lines from fishermen can get us caught up, and the bridge is a big one. Make sure you know what span you can go through, how to approach it. I don't actually have a slide about the bridge in particular, but there's extreme currents around the bridge, and there are some water levels which are just totally impassable. So you'll know when you get there, kind of like that other idea I was talking about. If it doesn't look like you should go through, don't go through and go downstream for the day. It's sort of the mid-level water ranges that the bridge is bad. It's not the low summertime or the high wintertime. It's somewhere in the middle. I don't want to give a range to it because I don't honestly remember the exact number. What bridges do is they create small, intense eddies, kind of like the picture that we had in the eddy picture below the pylons. It's such a small area that's disturbing the water that means the currents are even more crazy. If someone is to fall out right there, try and get to them as soon as you possibly can. Throw them a life jacket, because if they resurface, they might get sucked down again. If you get sucked down, curl up into a ball, let it spit you out, and then if that's not working, then spread out as big as possible. Those 2 things will get you out of those bad currents faster than other things when you're not wearing a life jacket. All right, we're going to touch on race day. I know a lot of you have wondered what to say to motivate people and that sort of thing. I think that's going to be a topic for another day mostly, but we're going to touch on it, particularly regatta's responsibilities. So the coxswain is in charge of the boat. As we found out, sometimes coaches are on the water or otherwise busy when races are going on, and so the coxswain is ultimately responsible from now on about making sure that they know all the information that they need to know and getting the boat to where it needs to be and whatever. And yeah, so what do you need to know if you're a coxswain? You need to know your bow number. That's either going to be 1 to 8 in the sprint season, or it's going to be a larger number if it's a head race. You also need to know your race number, and that includes an event title and an event number, such as like event 18, mixed novice 8 plus or something. You need to know your launch time. And so here's some guidelines, but it's going to really vary by how far you have to go. And when in doubt, ask beforehand, a long time before race day, ideally. So everybody knows. Race day for coaches is incredibly stressful, so we are trying to get this information known ahead of time. For 1Ks, you launch about 30 minutes ahead of time, stretch 1 hour before, and hands-on 45 minutes before. For 5Ks, launch about 45 minutes ahead of time, stretch an hour and a half before, an hour and 15 minutes before, and hands-on 1 hour before. One key thing is making sure the boat doesn't hit anything. That's particularly relevant at regattas and stuff where there's boats, trailers, people, everything, etc. And when in doubt, just have your rowers weigh enough, go look, see if they're going to hit something, and then if they aren't, then go ahead and let them go. So when you're coxing a 1K race, the most important thing is to know what the moves are and make with the race plan ahead of time. We're going to start having race plans this year, and everyone in the boat should know it, particularly the coxswain. So things you're going to call is the start 5, 3/4, half, half, 3/4, lengthen, full. Now those words may vary based on what your actual start sequence is, and that will vary by boat. Then we're going to call the high 10, and that's actually the numbers. Some people count down, some people count up. 1, 2, 3. Try and be as excited and ramping the crew up as possible when you're doing this. Sometimes you can say 4 with the legs, 5 driving it down, 6, let's go, yeah, that sort of thing. And then you'll settle, and then you say settle. Settle is the most important word. That way everyone collects and gathers at that next stroke. At some point in the race, when things get frantic, calling 10 to breathe is always a good thing to do. Finding out what motivates the athletes in your boat and say something for each person at some point is always useful. Just ask them beforehand. Make sure to call the power 10s and the sprint as prescribed in the race plan. Most of the courses we do are buoyed courses, so paying attention to where those buoys are and what color they are when is very important. We don't want to have it, we don't want to be in the wrong spot and have our rowers start sprinting at like 200 meters in or something. Periodically tell stroke seat if they're off the stroke rate. If you can whisper it, not through the cox box, that's often helpful. Then the other rowers don't hear it. If you need to tell everyone, then you can tell everyone. You should also tell everyone, or at least the stroke seat, at the settle, after the 500, and at the sprint at the minimum of what their stroke rate is. State the position of the boats if it's possible to make a move to motivate other crews. But if it's impossible to make a move, don't ever say like you're 2 lengths behind another crew. But if they're 4 seats down and they can and it looks like they've got more, say we're 4 seats behind. Let's catch up. We got this. Let's walk through them, you know? This is not the time to coach technique unless there's something that, like, is very much a problem, like set or something like that. If someone's doing something weird, it's a 4-minute race. They'll be done very quickly. Talk to them later. Your primary responsibility with steering is keeping a straight course with the rudder. Athlete power differentials should only be used in emergencies. I put a video on here of me coxing a 2K. It is actually a visualization video. So if you start at 1:30 in, it's on the Rowing Tidbits page as well. It's just visualizing a 2K race. You'll hear what some of the things are I say. I think it's more realistic of what you'll probably sound like as a coxswain. You can also Google like other coxing videos on YouTube, but often those people are really good and trained. So aspire to be them, realize you're going to sound like me, and yeah, just keep improving. So there you go. So if you're coxing a 5K race, the first thing you need to know is they're long and you need to talk a lot. The worst thing to hear in a 5K race is nothing, just silence. So one thing to do is practice at home. Just try and talk for 30 minutes straight. Maybe sometime when your family members aren't home or something, so you don't annoy the heck out of everyone. But it doesn't matter what you talk about, or you could try to do it for rowing. It's a little harder when you're not in the moment to actually talk 30 minutes straight about rowing, but why not try it? Motivational stories, jokes, 10s for everything under the sun, 10 for sitting up tall, 10 for your pair partner, 10 for our team, 10 for winter training, 10 for how hard you've worked, etc., etc., etc. And just know ahead of time some of those things that you're going to say. Some things will come to you in the moment, but having some ideas of things to say will be great, because it takes between 18 to 30 minutes, depending on how good your crew is, and that can be a very long time to talk for. And some races, you're not going to be near any other boats, and so you're not going to say, hey, let's walk up on them or something. Sometimes it's just, we're going, there's another buoy. Don't say that, you know. Reminding people to sit up tall or lengthen are good, but don't get in too much into the details of technical coaching during a race. It's just not the time. Don't get too hung up on stroke rate. As long as the boat is moving efficiently and feels good, it'll be slower than a sprint race. It may be higher or lower than we practiced at practice, but it maybe let the stroke seat know if you're getting check or if it feels really sluggish, and make an adjustment. But if it's moving like you expect it to move, then just stick with it. Another key here is know the right-of-way rules and follow them. They'll be different for every race. Going to the coach's coxswain's meeting or watching it later is very important. That goes for passing and things like that. And then selecting a good line. The difference between a good line and a bad line in a head race can mean the world. It can mean a few minutes sometimes, especially when everyone else's handicaps are so big. And then another friendly reminder not to hit anything, because you're financially responsible for it, so don't do it. Okay, at this point in the presentation, I'm going to have Rachel show you a Cox box. So this is now time for Rachel to get the Cox box. And she's going to show you how to plug it in. There's little prongs on it, and it goes one specific direction into the boat. The headset plugged into the Cox box itself. You turn it on by rotating a switch. She'll show you what info it shows. We have a basic one, so it doesn't show that much information. It shows you number of strokes, stroke rate, time, etc. She'll also show you how to reset it, if she can figure it out. If not, we will Google that. How to wear it. You wear it around your head for the microphone, making sure the microphone can actually be near but not touching your mouth because we all share it. Key with Cox box is remembering to take it out of the boat when you're done. We've had a couple people leave it in there, and that was bad because we could have lost it. Alright, steering. So, this is the opposite of a car. You push the hand forward the direction you want to go. So if you want to turn to your right or starboard, if you want to turn towards starboard, then you push your right hand forward. If you want to turn to your left, push your left hand forward. Try to only steer when the blades are in the water. It really affects the set when you do it on the recovery. Go back to neutral in between. Most of our boats have something signifying a neutral position, like a safety pin or a piece of tape or something. If it doesn't, let someone know and we'll put one on there. Small movements are very important. It's very easy to overcorrect, and then you start swerving all over the river. And once you start swerving, you just get in that perpetual swerve. So tiny movements, and then you'll get it. It usually takes about 3 strokes to see the results of when you change direction. So if you only need a little change, you may stop steering before you even see a change start. If you wait until you're pointed to the correct direction to stop steering, you will overcorrect. Some boats are more agile than others and turn faster. The 8, for example, steers like a dream. Some new coxswains hate it because it's so responsive, but small movements are key. Another thing to mention about the coxswain seat that I didn't put in a slide is just be careful where you step. If it looks like it's reinforced, then you can step there. If it doesn't look like it's reinforced, then don't step there. We have boats with varying degrees of reinforcement in varying places. When in doubt, ask. Yeah, thanks for listening. I think you guys are going to go practice now, so have fun with the rest of the class, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there.